historical accounts, and oral histories. I have also conducted extensive new interviews with many key players and observers, including such distinguished men and women as Brent Scowcroft, Doris Kearns Goodwin, Richard Goodwin, Norman Ornstein, Joe Klein, top LBJ aide Harry McPherson, and many others. They are, of course, in no way responsible for the alternate histories recounted here. We begin with a fact that has gone almost completely forgotten. On December 11, 1960, a 73-year-old would-be suicide bomber named Richard Pavlik was parked outside the Palm Beach, Florida home of President-elect John F. Kennedy, holding in his hand a switch connected to 7 sticks of dynamite, enough to level a small mountain. His presence ignored by the Secret Service, Pavlik was, in the words of the agency's chief, seconds away from murdering the incoming President of the United States. Only Pavlik's reluctance to kill Kennedy in front of his wife and child, who had come to the door to see him off to church, stayed his hand. He was arrested 4 days later in Florida by authorities after he sent threatening notes to the postmaster back home in Belmont, New Hampshire. If Jacqueline Kennedy had slept in that Sunday morning, or was at breakfast, or was tending to Caroline or her infant son John Jr., Kennedy would have been killed before ever becoming president. And then? The second history puts Robert Kennedy at the center, but now it is June 4, 1968, the night of the California primary. A series of insignificant random decisions sent Robert Kennedy unprotected into the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel. A change in any one of those decisions would have put Kennedy out of harm's way, or would have put a protective barrier between Kennedy and Sirhan Sirhan's pistol. For more than 40 years, historians, political journalists, and still grieving admirers have asked, would he have won if he had lived, and what might have been different? Here's an answer. The third narrative illustrates the fact that many twists of fate do not involve matters of life and death. In 1976, President Gerald Ford was rapidly closing the gap between himself and Governor Jimmy Carter, when, in the middle of the second presidential debate, a critical gaffe suddenly swung momentum the other way. If Ford had taken advantage of a panelist's offer to rephrase his clumsy answer, he would have avoided a week's worth of battering by the press, and would also have avoided antagonizing a large voting bloc that was very much up for grabs. How crucial would that have been? It would have taken a shift of only 12,000 votes in 2 states to keep Gerald Ford in the White House after 1976. And then? The history of this country might have been dramatically and surprisingly different. These alternate histories I've designed are, of course, only possibilities. Someone else may offer up perfectly plausible scenarios in which the same accidents of fates I chronicle change everything in wholly different ways. And that's the point. History doesn't turn on a dime, it turns on a plugged nickel. If I'm accused of playing with history, I plead guilty with an explanation. When we consider how our country, our fortunes, our lives might have been different if it had rained in Dallas on November 22, 1963, so that John Kennedy's car was covered by a bubble top, if security guard Frank Willis hadn't found the tape on an office door at the Watergate complex on June 17, 1972, if John Hinckley's gun had been aimed an inch or two to Ronald Reagan's right on March 31, 1981, if Bill Clinton had ordered an aide to banish from the White House that intern who was flashing her underwear at him, if the Democrats in Duval County, Florida, had not inadvertently instructed first-time voters to mark their ballots in a way that invalidated thousands of votes for Al Gore, then playing with history is a small bit of payback for the way history has played with us.
Palm Beach, Florida, December 11th, 1960, 9:45 a.m. He stepped out of the doorway of the house, nodded to the men guarding the entrance, offered a slight wave to the photographers across the street, and began walking to the black sedan parked on North Ocean Boulevard that would take him to St. Edward's Church. He was not the most observant of Catholics, but a visit to church on Sunday, chronicled by the press, came with the territory. He put a hand into the side pocket of his lightweight tropical worsted suit, ran his other hand through his hair, and glanced up at the blue sky with an appreciative nod. A good day for a round of golf. A few hours by the pool working on the speech. Sorensen had sent a draft, a good one, but it was too long.